Diabotical is a game with no speed limit, which means if you want to be faster than your opponents, you'll definitely want to learn all the movement tricks. Plus it's really fun and easy to do with a little practice. In Diabotical, there are 3 types of movement physics: Diabotical physics, Vintage physics, and Race physics. We're going to start with the default physics used in most of the game modes, Diabotical physics. Before we get started, let's go into the HUD options and drag the speed element into our HUD editor. This will make it so that we can see how fast we're going. I'm going to also have my controls on screen. The upwards arrow next to my forward key in the controls shows when I'm pressing jump. Jumping is going to be very important for keeping our speed up. It's worth taking a look at your binds early and finding what's comfortable. When you practice, you build up muscle memory, and changing your controls later can become a challenge. The earlier you find comfortable controls, the better. In Diabotical physics, the primary method of acceleration is called Strafejumping. Before you start Strafejumping, we have to start accelerating from a standstill. The most practical and ubiquitous methods for accelerating from a standstill in this game are dashing and Circlejumping. Dashing is simple. To dash, you literally hit a single key. By default, dash is bound to shift. Just pressing your dash key will give you a speed of 445 units per second. If you're holding any directional key when you press dash, you'll dash in the direction held. You have to be on a flat surface for dash to work, and it has a cooldown of 3 seconds. Taking any damage will also put your dash on cooldown. You can also incorporate dash into your movement by holding your dash key when you're in the air. Doing this will make you dash as soon as you hit the ground. This is a great way to change directions rapidly, to get around the map faster, or confuse your opponents when rushing them or escaping. Because it's disabled when you take damage, relying on dash mid-combat is often not a good idea. Before we go any further, it's important that you know that Diabotical has a feature called Autohop. You don't have to click jump every time you want to jump, you can hold it. So long as you're holding jump when you land, you'll always jump. To circle jump, in essence, you're flinging yourself in the direction you want to travel. Start on the ground and arc your movement along a circular path by swiping your mouse while holding forward and a strafe key. When you're about to point in the direction you want to travel in, jump. Contrary to its name, you shouldn't be doing a full circle when circle jumping, but you'll get a feel for this the more you play. I would advise that you learn to circle jump, as this is also going to be the basis of changing directions when you have a lot of speed later on. Once you've gotten moving, you'll have to start strafe jumping to accelerate. This is where the uncapped speed comes in. To strafe jump, you'll hold your forward key and the strafe key corresponding to the side you're looking at, while slowly and smoothly swiping your mouse away from your path of travel. As you can see, because strafe jumping requires that you continually turn, you'll naturally start to veer off course. When you need to adjust the direction you're moving in, you're going to flick your mouse to the opposite side of your path so that you're continuing to strafe jump but correcting your course. You might be thinking at this time, okay, I go fast in a straight line, but I lose all my speed when I turn. The 2 primary methods of turning are banking off of walls, something that most map makers facilitate with their map designs, which is where you bonk into a wall and try to maintain as much momentum as you can, and groundframing. Groundframing is a technique where you land for a fraction of a second and perform a small circle jump. You'll lose speed with groundframing, but you'll gain more control over turning. The better you get at it, the less speed you'll lose. At higher speeds, you'll find that you slide more while ground framing, which gives you a bit of a grace period to ground frame without losing much speed at all. Half-beat strafe jumping is a technique used to minimize your mouse movement and still accelerate. This is a more advanced technique that I would advise focusing on only after you've gotten the hang of strafe jumping. To half-beat strafe jump, get into a strafe jump as you normally would, but when you go to change the side you're strafing to, flick only a small amount, let go of your forward key, and hold only the strafe key corresponding to the side you're switching to. Half-beat strafe jumping's behavior is the same, only the angle you look at and the keys you're holding change when switching over. This is a bit confusing at first, but once you get it, you'll find it tremendously useful. Clipping is a wonderful thing in this game that allows what could be an otherwise frustratingly slow movement technique to be a lot faster in a lot of areas. It allows you to slide around ledges and corners. There's a small grace period after you jump that will allow you to clip through corners and maintain momentum. The faster you're going, the more forgiving a clip will be. To clip corners, land just before a corner and jump while strafe jumping as usual. This technique has a bit of a learning curve, and the angle that you jump into a corner will determine whether or not a clip succeeds. Clipping will take getting a feel for, but with some practice, eventually it will start to feel intuitive. Just be mindful, trying to clip a corner and failing means that you'll hit the corner and lose all of your speed, which might leave you standing still in a bad situation. To rocket jump, look at the ground or wall closest to you and shoot a rocket while jumping. Hitting jump and shooting a rocket at the same time is the easiest way to start. Once you're moving, you'll continue to use strafing techniques to maintain acceleration. Remember, your rockets propel you away from the explosion. If you shoot rockets at the floor, you'll go up. If you shoot rockets at the wall, you'll be thrown horizontally. Once you get moving fast enough, you can shoot rockets directly below or in front of you and still get acceleration from them. It's also worth keeping in mind that in some game modes such as Duel and Warm-Up, rockets do self-damage, but in others, such as Wipeout and Time Trials, they do not. In Diabotical, there are a few other ways to gain speed that are situational. These are Weeballs, a utility item, jump pads, and in some cases, teleporters. There are two Weeballs for movement, Explosion Weeball and Implosion Weeball. To use the Explosion Weeball, look at the floor or wall closest to you and throw the Weeball while jumping. This will propel you in the opposite direction. This operates a lot like rocket jumping, and you should be jumping as or before you throw the Weeball. To use the Implosion Weeball to move horizontally, throw it down in front of you while you're jumping and it'll suck you in and fling you out at high speeds. To use the Implosion to gain height, line up against the wall, throw it at the wall above you, and jump at the same time. The next physics we'll be looking at will most likely only be seen in Time Trials game modes, a mode in which the goal is not to shoot and survive, but to get to the end of the map as fast as you can as players compete for the fastest times. There are a ton of really fun Time Trials maps and a bunch of very friendly Time Trials players willing to help out. Don't be shy about trying this mode out and talking to the players. After all, this is the best way to practice and improve your movement. Vintage physics are very simple and very familiar if you've played Quake 1 or any Source Engine game like Half-Life or Counter-Strike before. To begin accelerating, you're always going to use dash. There's no faster way to start accelerating with these physics. Once you've dashed, the only available method of acceleration is Airstrafing. What this means is that acceleration is achieved by holding left when you turn left and holding right while you turn right. You won't accelerate if you aren't turning at all times. Race physics are an anomaly. In previous Quake-likes, the physics most similar to race physics were commonly referred to as CPM, which stands for Challenge Pro Mode. This comes from a mod for Quake 3 Arena called Challenge Pro Mode Arena. Race physics incorporate strafejumping for the fastest form of acceleration, airstrafing like in vintage physics for acceleration while turning, and a technique we're going to cover briefly known as W-turning. W-turning, simply put, is holding W and swiping your mouse. This is the fastest way to turn without losing speed, but it operates on a logarithmic curve that's most easily explained by saying just don't turn too fast. It's important to mention that you will not gain any speed while W-turning. Another set of techniques unique to race physics is the ability to double and triple jump. To perform these, land as close as you can to a ledge with a good amount of speed while holding jump. Remember, don't let go of jump. This skill is necessary for time trials. Blaster climbing is something that can be done in all physics, but you'll see it shine the most in race. To blaster climb, line up with the wall, point your crosshair where the floor and wall meet, hold forward, and start firing while you jump. I can't really go into detail about how blaster works at speed, as it's worthy of a tutorial all its own, but the principle is fairly similar to rocket jumping on a much smaller scale. It's also worth noting that in any race physics lobby, if you're moving vertically against a wall, you can ledge grab by holding forward against said wall. When you approach the top of the ledge, you'll step onto it, nullifying any airtime that your ascent would have otherwise resulted in. Slick is simple, but odd to explain. Any surface can be slick, so it can look different depending on the map, but they'll most often look like an icy patch of ground. Slicks operate a bit like vintage physics. On slicks, you only need to hold a single strafe key and swipe your mouse towards that same side. You generally don't want to jump. You won't gain speed if you are not turning on slick. You'll have to get a feel for how fast you should turn on slick, as there is a threshold for how fast you can turn, but if you go too slow, you won't accelerate very much. Remember though, the motion always needs to be smooth. I'm Sohm, and thanks for watching. If you have any questions or scathing criticisms, feel free to leave them in the comments. Or don't, I don't care. I also don't really care if you like or subscribe. Just please, give Diabotical a chance, and stick with it, and I'm sure you'll have fun once you begin to get the hang of it. And I mean, if you don't, there's probably something wrong with you. Or me.